You were taught that medicine heals. But what if that's the decoy? What if the real goal of Big Pharma is to keep you barely functioning, never cured, never free? Behind polished logos and friendly ads lies a brutal calculus, drugs designed to manage, not mend. Conditions crafted by marketers, side effects engineered as gateways to more prescriptions. Today, we pull the curtain. We expose the documents, the dividends, and the deliberate decisions that turn your illness into an investment. Because here's the question no one dares to ask. What if healing you is the system's worst-case scenario? Curing you was never part of the business model. Because in Big Pharma's world, healing is in progress, it's financial collapse. What keeps the engine running is consistency, a carefully engineered dependence that keeps you functional but never truly free. This is the hidden truth behind one of the most powerful industries on Earth. Big Pharma doesn't sell breakthroughs, it sells continuity. A healed patient leaves, but a managed one returns over and over. Ask yourself this: when was the last time a drug completely solved your illness? Not just softened the symptoms, but actually removed the root. Most don't even try. They offer regulation, a reduction in discomfort, a moment of calm in a storm that never really ends. And that calm, it comes with a price tag. You pay for it monthly, quietly, indefinitely. Each refill is more than a transaction. It's a quiet signature renewing your place in a system built on dependency. And while you're busy adjusting to side effects and dosage changes, high above, in offices lined with glass and data dashboards, no one's celebrating lives restored. They're measuring something else: retention. You're not seen as a life saved. You're seen as a line item, a revenue forecast, not a recovery, a recurring charge. They have a name for it: chronic treatment optimization. It means turning your condition into a revenue stream that never ends. In that world, each recurring prescription is a reliable deposit, each incurable diagnosis a long-term financial asset. Now picture the scene: a high-rise boardroom, sleek, silent, LED panels glowing with statistics not of health, but of adherence. An executive smiles, 92% compliance. Applause, bonuses, stocks surge. Your suffering doesn't even register, because this isn't healthcare, it's monetization. And the brilliance of the system? It doesn't need to cure. It just needs to keep you participating. Not dying, not thriving, just medicated enough to keep going. But it doesn't stop there. Some prescriptions aren't remedies, they're invitations. One drug dulls the ache, the next calms the reaction, a third fixes what the second disrupted, a fourth helps you sleep after the third causes insomnia. Before long, your morning doesn't start with clarity, it starts with compliance. 5 pills, 2 bottles, 1 identity, built around a schedule. You're no longer recovering, you're maintaining a protocol. You're not escaping illness, you're adjusting to it. And the pharmacy? It isn't a place of healing, it's the storefront of a trillion-dollar continuity scheme. And here's where the illusion cracks even further. Because when curing someone means losing a customer, what incentive is there to end disease? Why chase elimination when prolongation is infinitely more profitable? It's why some of the most promising treatments vanish, not because they failed, but because they succeeded too well. And when a therapy threatens the wrong ledger, not your body, but their portfolio, it disappears without a trace. Ask the question they hope you never will. If the cure was discovered tomorrow, would you ever know? Now imagine a different world, a world where scientists race toward resolution, not retention, where medicine isn't dictated by markets, but by urgency, where the goal is freedom, not dosage. That world exists,
but it's buried under patents, pressure, and a wall of polished PR. You deserve to see the whole system, not just the pill, the pattern, not just the label, the logic. And if this made something shift inside you, good. It means you're no longer looking at the bottle. You're looking past it. And if you're ready to break out of the illusion, smash like. Because what comes next, it doesn't just question the cure. It questions the condition itself. What if some of these illnesses were never real to begin with?
There was a time when being tired just meant you needed rest. Today, it might mean you need medication. But that shift didn't begin in a lab. It started in a marketing meeting. Some of the most profitable conditions in modern medicine weren't discovered. They were constructed, not with microscopes, but with whiteboards, not by doctors, but by strategists. In the silent halls of pharmaceutical headquarters, a different kind of research takes place, one that doesn't focus on your biology, but on your psychology. Because if you can shape how people feel about their health, you can shape what they're willing to pay for. It's called disease awareness. But what it really does is create demand by redrawing the line between what's normal and what's pathological. Here's how it works. Take something universal, stress, fatigue, distraction, aging, and reframe it with clinical language. Tired? You might have energy regulation deficiency. Restless? Neurobehavioral instability. Feeling off? It could be a syndrome. Suddenly, what's ordinary starts to sound urgent. What's human begins to feel like a condition. At first, it seems exaggerated until you start seeing it everywhere. In ads, in interviews, in pamphlets at your doctor's office. And eventually, one simple question begins to echo in your head. Could this be me? That's when it clicks. Because once you accept the label, the solution is already waiting, pre-approved, pre-packaged, ready to become part of your life. This isn't about creating fake illnesses. It's about reframing the human experience as something that needs constant management. Because if everyone is potentially unwell, then everyone becomes a potential client. And the treatment isn't designed to end. It's designed to integrate into your habits, your identity, your sense of self. Like caffeine, like insurance, like fear. And it doesn't stop with inventing new conditions. It also reshapes the old ones. By lowering diagnostic thresholds, blurring symptom definitions, and widening the net, what used to be considered mild now qualifies as treatable. What was once rare is suddenly common. With a single change in clinical guidelines, millions go from fine to at risk, not because anything changed in their bodies, but because the definition moved. Anxiety, ADHD, IBS, insomnia, all real, all serious, but now they're everywhere and endlessly medicated. Because when more people qualify, more people are prescribed. And in this model, a prescription isn't a treatment, it's a subscription. It doesn't stop, it renews. And often, it all starts with one soft, familiar line. You're not alone. It sounds like comfort, but it's not a diagnosis. It's a hook. Because once you start to identify with the condition, it becomes part of who you are. And stopping the medication starts to feel like losing part of yourself. That's when the most dangerous shift happens. You stop questioning whether you're actually sick and start assuming that you must be. Because the alternative, that you've been sold a problem you never had, is almost too disturbing to consider. And that's the genius of it all. This system doesn't just sell medication, it sells the need for it. It manufactures the condition, the fear, and the solution in that order. Behind the scenes, forecasts aren't built around scientific breakthroughs. They're built around addressable populations, people who can be reached, labeled, and converted. Sales reps don't memorize molecular mechanisms. They learn how to ask questions that plant doubt. Clinical trials aren't published for clarity. They're filtered for narrative value. Every awareness campaign is a disguised product launch. Every soft, supportive slogan is a carefully placed breadcrumb leading back to a prescription pad. And if all of this feels strangely familiar, that's not coincidence. It's orchestration. And if something in you paused while listening, good. Because once you see the mechanics, you can't unsee the machine. You stop trusting the branding. You start interrogating the offer. You begin to wonder, what part of me is genuinely unwell? And what part was quietly redefined to fit a marketing plan? If this chapter cracked something open, if it made the ground beneath your beliefs start to shift, then stay with us. Hit subscribe, because the next layer goes even deeper. What if the treatment doesn't fix the illness? What if the treatment becomes the illness? And what if that was the plan all along? When you take a pill, you think you're solving a problem, but what you're really doing is entering a system, a chain reaction built to keep moving long after the first dose. The pharmaceutical industry tells you side effects are rare, unintended, unfortunate. But what if they're not? What if side effects are part of the design, not to heal, but to extend the journey? A statin lowers your cholesterol, but your joints start to ache. You're given painkillers, which upset your stomach. Now it's reflux medication. That shifts your mood. Suddenly, you're on antidepressants, which kill your libido. So they prescribe another pill to fix that. And just like that, what started as one condition has multiplied into a routine of daily chemical management. You're not healing, you're accumulating. Inside the industry, there's a term they don't share with the public: lifetime therapy. The ideal isn't a cure, it's a treatment you build your life around, one that keeps going even when it creates new issues. In fact, new symptoms aren't seen as a failure. They're an opportunity. Each one unlocks a new product, a new prescription, a new revenue stream. This isn't chaos, it's choreography. Each pill leads to the next, a sequence you didn't choose, but one you're now performing daily. That's how the system grows, not by reaching new patients, but by going deeper into the ones it already has. You become a vertical market. Every biological reaction opens the door to another solution, another dependency, another line in your medical record, and their profit report. And the beauty of it all? It feels like care. You're told this is just how medicine works, that all drugs have risks, that maybe the dose just needs adjusting. But if you take a step back, you start to see it. Why are high-risk drugs used as first-line treatments? Why are gentler, cheaper alternatives ignored or buried? Why does stopping feel terrifying while continuing feels like surrender? Because a patient who's healed is no longer a customer. They don't return, they don't refill, and they don't feed the model. That's why side effects aren't a flaw in the system, they are the system. They don't close your case, they reopen it, quietly, continuously. And the next time something feels off, it begins again. Let's try something else. But here's what almost no one tells you. Side effects don't just change your chemistry, they changed you. You start to forget what life felt like before the fatigue, before the weight gain, before the anxiety, the insomnia, the numbness. And because the only answers you're given come in bottles, the idea of quitting doesn't feel brave, it feels dangerous. So you stay. Not because you're improving, but because you're afraid of what happens if you stop. And in that fear,
the system finds its perfect ally. A scared patient says yes, a confused one doesn't resist, and a medicated one, that's recurring revenue. Let's be clear, this isn't about vilifying medicine. It's about confronting a reality where treatment is more valuable than resolution, where trials are built to showcase benefits and minimize risks, where long-term effects are buried in footnotes and often discovered years too late, where the boundary between help and harm is so carefully blurred most people never notice when they've crossed it, until the damage is done. And when the consequences become undeniable, when the harm is too large to ignore, some stories still vanish, because the most devastating side effects in history weren't just overlooked, they were ignored, suppressed, sometimes deliberately buried. And when that happens, we're not talking about missteps anymore. We're talking about control, silence, and something far more calculated than the public was ever meant to see. Because when even harm becomes profitable, the line between medicine and manipulation disappears. And that leads us to the next chapter, where the illusion of healing ends completely. Because some cures weren't just ignored, they were erased.
Some cures were never found. Others were found too early, and that was the problem. In the hidden corners of medical history, there are treatments that quietly disappeared, not because they didn't work, but because they worked too well. This is the chapter most people never hear about, because if you've built a trillion-dollar industry on managing illness, what happens when someone finds a way to eliminate it? You don't promote it. You don't celebrate it. You neutralize it. It starts quietly. A promising trial is paused. A patent is acquired and locked away. A research grant suddenly vanishes. A lead scientist steps down. The headlines say, "More research needed." But behind closed doors, the real message is simple. This changes too much. There are names that still echo, even if no one wants to say them out loud. Dr. Stanislaw Brzezinski, Royal Rife, treatments dismissed, ridiculed, buried. Not because they were debunked, but because someone was watching. Someone with a lot to lose. And the pattern hasn't stopped. Every time a discovery threatens the recurring revenue model, the response is the same. Not interest, but interference. Not curiosity, but control. Because when profit depends on chronic treatment, a one-time cure isn't progress, it's a threat. It doesn't just end a disease, it ends the cycle. It collapses a system built on return visits, prescription renewals, and lifelong management. Now take a step back and look at the bigger picture. There are diseases we've been close to curing for decades. Cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, always 5 years away, always just out of reach. Billions in research, countless walks, ribbons, and pledges. But somehow, the finish line keeps moving. Meanwhile, drugs with modest results and massive price tags get fast-tracked through approval because they don't disrupt the system, they fuel it. And once in a while, someone tries to speak up. A researcher, a whistleblower, a former executive. They hint at the trials that were silenced, the data that was altered, the treatments that were taken and hidden. They're quickly dismissed, labeled disgruntled, unstable, conspiratorial. But their stories all echo the same truth. Something was found, and then it was gone. So ask yourself, what kind of system spends more on marketing than on innovation? What kind of science censors cures and champions subscriptions? What kind of world considers healing a liability? It's not a world built on compassion. It's a system built on control. Because a cure doesn't just stop symptoms, It stops dependency. It ends compliance. It restores something powerful, your autonomy. And that's what makes it dangerous. The most disruptive treatments don't make it to shelves. They end up sealed away, marked as inconclusive, buried under legal pressure and silence. Not because they failed, but because they worked, and that was the real problem. This isn't just about what we lost. It's about what we were never allowed to access in the first place. So if they were willing to hide the cure, what else have they hidden? Because once you see how far they'll go to protect the cycle, to protect the business, you start to realize medicine was never just about healing. And from here on, you'll never see it the same way again.
Most people assume the pharmaceutical industry is just slow, cautious, methodical, always waiting for better science and more proof. But what if the delays aren't about safety? What if they're about control? What if the real breakthroughs, the ones that could have changed everything, already happened and were quietly dismantled? Not because they didn't work, but because they didn't fit the plan. Because curing you completely was never the goal. This wasn't about blaming medicine. It was about exposing what medicine becomes when it's no longer driven by healing, but by shareholder interest. When suffering isn't a crisis, it's a business model. We uncovered how conditions can be constructed, how symptoms become subscriptions, and how true cures, when they threaten the cycle, are buried before they ever reach you. Not in dramatic headlines, but through quiet decisions. A meeting, a retraction, a project shelved. And now that you've seen the structure behind it all, it's impossible to unsee. Because the next time you're handed a diagnosis, a refill, or a promise of hope, you'll feel it, the weight behind the words. Not just treatment, but monetization. Not just advice, but influence. Not just care, but capital. If this made you pause, if it challenged what you've always believed, or made you feel like something doesn't add up, that's exactly why it matters. Like this video. Subscribe to Bull Secrets, not as a favor, but as a resistance. Because this kind of truth doesn't spread easily. It spreads when people like you stop looking away. And what comes next? It's already being hidden. And if you think this was dark, we're just getting started.